So next question, how does someone's vitamin D get so low? There are many other detox methods for getting heavy metals out. One of them is saunas, done in a very particular way.
They're doing it for an hour.
They're staying in there way too long.
Dr. Goodman, thank you so much for taking the time up to come and see me. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. I've been looking forward to this for a really long time, and I'm really happy that you're here. So I have this kind of culture in the show where I just ask the guests to go straight in. I don't really do the small talks. We're going to go head deep, and we want to learn and gain as much information as possible. So if you could give us a little bit of introduction of who you are, what you do, and your field.
Okay, thank you. My name's Dr. Jenny Goodman, and what I do is ecological medicine. And I started training as a medical student back in 1976. Long story short, I thought I was going to learn how to heal the sick, what causes illness, and therefore how we can prevent illness, both physical and mental. Fast forward to 1982, I graduated having learned very little of any of those things. I did work for a while as a junior doctor, and the bit I liked most was accident and emergency, because I was doing the right thing. I had no doubts about what I was doing, but in every other hospital department, I felt something was profoundly wrong. Not only were the people already very sick when they came in, nobody was asking why. How did this person get so sick? And this, they're so sick, it surely must have been brewing for a decade or more. And no one was doing preventive medicine. No one's inquiring about causes. And indeed, when I asked those questions on the ward, there was an icy silence. It was taboo to inquire about causes. So, I left. I ended up lecturing in medical sciences, partly at colleges of alternative medicine, where students were training to do herbalism, osteopathy, homeopathy, acupuncture, and so on, and also in adult education in the north of England for ordinary members of the public, demystifying medical knowledge. Subjects like women's health, politics of health, what is alternative medicine, and so on, because I think everyone can understand these matters, and it's important that they do. Then I went off and did a master's degree in psychotherapy and counselling in the 90s, and I really thought my days as a medic were over. But then in the late 1990s, I was lucky enough to discover the British Society for Ecological Medicine. And that is a wonderful bunch of doctors and now other practitioners as well, who are profoundly disillusioned with, the drug routine and the suppressing of the symptoms, and wanted to find ways to help people holistically really get better and not make them worse. And they were finding this through nutritional and environmental medicine, which are the two halves of ecological medicine. So in a nutshell, nutritional medicine is putting the good stuff back. Why is the good stuff missing? The vitamins, the minerals, the essential fatty acids. You alluded to this before when you mentioned depleted soil from decades of intensive farming, as well as junk food diets. And the other half is environmental medicine, the bad stuff that has got into us since the Industrial Revolution, the pollutants that are in our air, our water, our soil, and therefore in our food, and that are coming at us through every orifice of the body and through the skin, and which we are not really designed, in quotes, by evolution to cope with. We are not biologically equipped to deal with the 100,000 or so synthetic chemicals that have been manufactured in the past couple of 100 years, because 200 years is a blink of an eye in terms of evolutionary time. We have not adapted, and most of us cannot. So it's a question of how we survive and thrive on this very polluted planet with the pollution getting into our bodies. And the first step is to understand how it's getting in, how we can avoid it, what it's doing to our bodies, what it's doing to our minds. And of course, the link there is what's it doing to our brain, because the brain is absolutely part of the body. And the vast majority of toxic artificial chemicals to which we're being exposed are petrochemicals. They come from the activities of the petrochemical industry, which extend far wider than you might imagine. And because they're petrochemicals, they're lipophilic. That means they dissolve in fat. So they go straight through the skin into our bloodstream, they go through all the cell membranes, and they head for the fattiest organ of the body, which is the brain. You just asked me to introduce myself. I've gone a bit off topic, haven't I?
No, wow. Great introduction. That has been amazing. And just to carry on where you kind of stopped. So with everything you've just shared, in your experience, what are the most overlooked environmental factors that impact our mental health, well-being, and the brain?
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing that's overlooked is that the brain is part of the body. But I would put a caveat before I answer your question, which is I don't want to be reductionist, right? There are many important, not causes is too simplistic. There are many contributing factors behind what is undoubtedly an epidemic of mental illness, particularly among young people, or
Yes.
mental distress, profound mental distress. Right? I mean, some of it is social and economic conditions. Some of it is childhood trauma, lack of love, trauma or tragedy at any age. All those things are in the mix, and the kids are growing up knowing that their prospects ecologically and economically are appalling. And, there's all the malign influence of social media and advertising and the expectations, especially on young women. And sometimes you think, hello, what happened to feminism? So the kids are having a very, very hard time. And all of that is in the mix. And I absolutely wouldn't deny how crucial those influences are in causing mental distress. But my role, in a sense, is to say, hey, yes, and there are physical, chemical, biological factors going on as well that are in the mix. And if we can identify them, we can actually do something about them, perhaps rather more easily than we can about the other factors. So genetic tendencies play a very small role, but the role that they do play is to do with our genetic variations in our capacity to detoxify these chemicals. Because we do have enzymes produced by the liver that can break down some of the toxins in our environment, but there's huge variability in the human population about how well we can do that. Those of us that can't do it very well get most ill with things like chronic fatigue, which is a brain illness, and multiple chemical sensitivity, and certain mental illnesses. Those of us whose liver enzymes just by chance happen to work better, can break these toxins down quicker, so are less subject to the environmental factors contributing to mental and physical illness. But it's important to stress that these genetic differences between people would have made no difference to our physical or mental health before the Industrial Revolution. They have only become relevant since we've started polluting the planet. And of course, you can't poison the planet without poisoning the people. So yes, the nutritional and environmental factors are crucial in our epidemic of mental distress because the brain needs the right molecules and it needs not to have the wrong molecules on board. It's as simple as that. I mean, almost all forms of psychotherapy, talking therapy, work by making new synapses, literally new connections within the brain. That's great, but the brain can only do that, and the benefits can only last if the brain has all the nutrients it needs and is not poisoned by heavy metals and pesticides and all the substances that damage it. So, yeah, we need to get beyond Descartes. We need to stop splitting the mind from the body and work in a both and fashion. We need to work both together.
So you mentioned that the brain should be getting all the nutrients that it needs.
Yeah.
What nutrients should the brain be getting that we're currently not getting because of potential environmental factors?
Yeah, agricultural, industrialized agriculture and junk food diets and so on. Okay, so the most crucial one is vitamin D. Vitamin D. And we're recording this on the 1st of July 2025 in the midst of a heat wave, right? There's no shortage of vitamin D right now. If you go out into the sunshine for a moderate amount of time, don't expose a part of your body that hasn't seen the sun in a year for 2 hours because you will burn. And the idea is not to burn, but you do need to make vitamin D. And our most natural way of doing it is in the sunshine. However, we also, if we're living in this climate in the UK, need to take vitamin D supplements through the winter, vitamin D3, because if you average it out over the year, there's actually not enough sunshine in Britain to get the vitamin D that we need. So we need to supplement it, I would say, from mid-October to late March. And we also need to eat the foods that contain vitamin D, which is oily fish, some dairy products, and some eggs. The brain also needs all the B vitamins, but especially vitamin B12 in much higher amounts than the so-called recommended daily allowance or nutrient reference ranges that they now have. Those, and this applies to vitamin D as well, the so-called normal ranges and the normal amounts that we're supposed to take are based on science that's 100 years old, completely dated, and it only refers to severe life-threatening deficiency diseases, right? So the amount of vitamin D your GP thinks you need is just the amount needed to prevent rickets. Your GP probably doesn't know that we also need vitamin D in much higher amounts than that needed to keep the bones healthy for brain function, for immune function, and for the function of the adrenal glands and the whole immune system and making hormones and all sorts of other things. And by the way, what the body does in the sunshine is it makes vitamin D from the cholesterol that is just under the skin. So if you're on statins and you've got very low cholesterol, you're going to not be able to make vitamin D from the sunshine. And that's hugely problematic, okay, and not good for the brain. So going back to what else the brain needs, as well as vitamin D, all the B vitamins, B12 largely helps by preventing the accumulation of homocysteine. Homocysteine is an amino acid that we make. It's an intermediary in a biochemical cycle, but it's meant to exist only for a fraction of a second. If you've got certain genetic glitches, you're going to have great difficulty getting rid of it. It builds up, it damages the brain, it damages the heart. It's implicated not only in heart disease, but also in dementia, multiple sclerosis, and mental illness. So really high dose vitamin B12, not cyanocobalamin. The name tells you it's akin to cyanide. That's synthetic. Hydroxycobalamin may work, but the best form for most people is methylcobalamin in substantial doses. That protects the brain tremendously. Plus, we need the omega-3 essential fatty acids from fish oil, from eating oily fish. And we also need some of the good omega-6, particularly if there are menstrual issues going on. We don't want to have too much omega-3 and not enough good omega-6. So the good omega-6 is from evening primrose oil, borage oil, and so on. And from not eating the kind of refined vegetable oils you get in supermarkets in plastic bottles that looks like wheat, that is toxic junk. But cold pressed organic virgin vegetable oils from hemp seeds, sunflower, and so on, and safflower, kept in a dark glass bottle in the fridge so it doesn't oxidize, that's the good omega-6, and the brain needs some of that as well. If you're taking omega-3 and omega-6, don't take them in a combo, take them at separate times of the day, because they both use the same enzyme which processes them into natural anti-inflammatories. The enzyme's called delta-6 desaturase. You can forget that if it's not relevant to you. But the enzyme needs zinc. So this is the next thing we're coming on to, the minerals that the brain needs. It needs zinc to make that enzyme work, but it needs zinc for 100 other reasons as well. And magnesium. The brain cannot function without magnesium, and the muscles cannot relax without magnesium. So you get this vicious circle where you're deficient in magnesium, so your muscles tense up. So your brain feels tense and upset because that's the feedback it gets from the tense muscles. When we're stressed, we lose magnesium in the urine. And the only way to break that vicious cycle is to take magnesium as a supplement and not magnesium oxide or magnesium carbonate that just come out the other end, a form of magnesium that's absorbed like magnesium bisglycinate, magnesium taurate, particularly good for high blood pressure, or magnesium combined with any amino acid. Magnesium citrate is a kind of halfway line. It's okay, but the ones I mentioned are better. Now, if you've ever worked with kids with ADHD and autism, you will know they're always deficient in zinc and magnesium, always. So we need to put those in, but we also need to think, why is it so difficult to normalize these kids' levels of zinc and magnesium? Probably because they also have toxic heavy metals on board. So cadmium, nickel, lead, mercury, aluminium, all of these keep the good minerals out. So the toxins are anti-nutrients and the nutrients are antitoxins. The more good minerals you put in, the less possible it is for the dodgy ones to get a foothold. So we need the zinc, we need the magnesium, we need iodine, selenium, all of these good minerals. And we need a healthy microbiome, the friendly bacteria in the gut. I'm sure everybody now knows about the gut-brain axis, but we need a huge variety of healthy, friendly bacteria in our gut. And for that, we need to eat a huge variety of food, specifically a huge variety of vegetables. I call this vitamin V variety. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors, who I think on the whole were healthier and happier than we are, ate on average 1,000 different plants in a year. Now, you look at your shopping basket, how many different kind of vegetables do you eat in a year? In a week? One simple thing you can do is go out this week and buy a vegetable you've never eaten before, and then next week another vegetable you've never eaten before. And don't go to the supermarket. Get an organic veg box delivered from a company like Riverford or your local organic veg box delivery. Okay. So the brain needs those good friendly bacteria in the gut, and the gut influences the brain in many, many ways. If you've got unfriendly bacteria from having had antibiotics, or you've been on the pill, or you've just eaten loads too much sugar, they produce metabolites, these bacteria, their own waste products, which get into the bloodstream, get into the brain, but also the vagus nerve, which innervates the whole of the gut. And there is flow in both directions, messages from the brain to the gut, but also messages from the gut to the brain. And those messages are actual substances from the gut as a result of the bacteria, good or bad, which dissolve in the myelin sheath of the vagus nerve and get straight into the brain. In the same way as if you smell something toxic, if you inhale it, it dissolves in the myelin sheath of the olfactory nerve, which goes straight from the top of the nerve into the brain. It's only about 1 inch long. If you can smell it, it's in your brain. And that applies to a nice, healthy, essential oil like lavender, and it applies to traffic fumes. Okay. What else does the brain need? It needs antioxidants. Antioxidants are in fresh fruit and vegetables, and it needs sunshine, it needs sleep, it needs not too much sugar, and it needs love.
Mhm.
Those are the main
Wow.
nutrients for the brain.
Wow. Amazing 20 minutes already. So, considering most of the foods, most of the fruits and the veggies that we currently eat are genetically modified. As I said to you, I've mentioned that the soils have been depleted of its nutrients, and we are taking in so much toxins. How do we detoxify the body
So the
or the
first,
brain?
yeah, if you're detoxifying the body, you're detoxifying the brain. The
Yeah.
first and most important thing to say is eat organic. Because if what you're eating is Soil Association approved organic, it has never been genetically modified, right? Foods cannot get the Soil Association certification if they have been genetically modified. So people say, oh, it's too expensive to eat organic. And here's my reply. Firstly, it's health insurance. It's absolutely vital health insurance. Second, let's look at our priorities. Okay, in the 1950s and 60s, we spent 1/3 of our income on our food. Now it's down to about 8%. So, I eat organic, and there's other things I don't do and other things I don't buy. I had a patient in a consultation once some years ago who said, oh, I can't afford all this organic food. By the way, can we reschedule next month's consultation because I'll be in Barbados? Eating's about nice way to get your vitamin D if you can afford it. If it is about prioritizing. Third thing I would say is it's not necessarily more expensive. If you've been eating chicken 3 times a week and it's cruelty battery farmed chicken that's not been able to move, that's lost all its feathers, that's been fed on antibiotics because its immune system is so shot to pieces by the stress that it would go down with bugs otherwise, that cruelly factory farmed chicken 3 times a week is doing you no good, it's doing the planet no good, it's doing the chicken no good. However, if you replace that with eating organic, free range, happy, healthy chicken once a week, which is all you need, it's going to cost you less and it's going to cost the planet less. So those are the main arguments. And the final one is political. It should not be more expensive. Write to your MP and say, why is the government subsidizing the big industrial monocrop farmers and not subsidizing the small human scale organic family farms where they're doing good for the earth and they're doing good for everyone's bodies and brains? And if we all start buying the organic produce and we boycott the pesticide infested lettuce, the herbicide infested lettuce, and the cruelty infested meat, then we will make a difference. Consumer power is real power because what we buy will be produced and what we don't won't. And that's a quote from William Lana, who created Green Fibers, an organic cotton clothing company. So eating organic is absolutely number one. Second is fitting a water filter because of what is coming out of your tap. Now, what is coming out of your tap is not just H2O. It's not just water. It's the chlorine that they put in. Now, you need to kill dangerous bacteria in the water, but the Dutch do it by using ultraviolet light. They're not drinking chlorine. So there are other ways to do this. In some parts of the country, fluoride, which is another whole hot topic, and that is definitely poisoning kids' brains. We have 90 years worth of evidence that it lowers IQ, quite apart from damaging the kidneys, the ovaries, the thyroid, and the bones. What else is in your water is actually similar to what's in the soil. So if the plants have been grown with pesticides, which, by the way, were developed from war gases, nerve gases, and that's why the pesticides are still neurotoxic, very clearly, thousands of studies documenting this, showing that they're implicated in Parkinson's disease, in multiple sclerosis, in dementia, including Alzheimer's, as well as in cancer and endocrine disorders like anything to do with the menstrual cycle, PCOS, endometriosis, breast cancer, prostate cancer, the works, right? Pesticides, like plastics, are estrogen mimics. They sit on the estrogen receptors and they cause havoc. All of these pesticides, herbicides, fungicides are toxic, and the insecticides especially, you can avoid them by eating organic. You can avoid 90% of the exposure by eating strictly organic, and I think it's worth it. The other thing that horrible industrial farming is doing is using synthetic fertilizers, which is draining all the nutrients out of the soil and is also running down into the sea and the rivers and causing dead zones where nothing can grow, because it's paradoxical, really. It's fertilizer, but it's causing sterility because there's such overnutrition in there that the toxic algae bloom, use up all the oxygen, the fish die, whole aquatic ecosystems all over the world are dying because of the runoff of synthetic fertilizers from the kind of farms that plow too deeply, don't recycle organic matter, manure and compost into the earth, and don't have constant cover by green plants. And all of this means there's bare earth. And when there's a drought, the soil breaks up and is washed away in the wind. When there's a flood, it's washed away in the water. And the soil and the synthetic fertilizers end up in the river. Now, our privatized water companies in the UK do not succeed in removing the residues of those pesticides and those synthetic fertilizers from your tap water. They also do not have procedures in place to remove drugs and hormones. Well, what are drugs and hormones doing in the water? They are peed out by the other people who are taking them, right? Your neighbor who's on HRT or the pill or antibiotics or chemotherapy or antidepressants, antihypertensives, anti-inflammatories, antihypertensives, anti-epileptics. Note that all the drug groups begin with anti, because you're fighting the body's processes rather than getting alongside the body as an ally. So what does it need? What does the immune system need to do its job better? So all of these substances, these drugs, we all pee. And so they find their way into the water table. Also, all the pets, the domestic pets that are on those drugs, and also all the farm animals, the non-organic, non-free range, miserable farm animals, they're on antibiotics because their living conditions mean they would be so stressed that their immune systems wouldn't prevent them getting infections. So we're drinking the antibiotics from those animals. We're eating them if we're eating non-organic meat, and we're drinking them if we're not filtering our tap water. So tip 1 is eat organic. Tip 2 is filter your water. And tip 3 is write to your MP about all this.
Wow. So is it is it fair to say that, and like I said to you before we started recording, that we are slowly being poisoned?
Yeah.
And is it fair for me to assume that we're slowly being poisoned for profit? I know this is like a really borderline dangerous thing to say.
No, it's absolutely right. We are being poisoned for profit. There is no other motivation. Right. So whether it's the water companies or the monocrop industrial farmers or the GMO, genetically modified organism seed companies, who are more and more closely linked with the pesticide companies, because remember, herbicides like glyphosate are developed to work with genetically modified plants, or rather the plants are genetically modified to be able to withstand the glyphosate. This is Roundup, which has been very clearly linked with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other kinds of cancers. There have been court cases where the plaintiffs have won, and Monsanto / Bayer, the company concerned, has admitted liability for causing these cancers. These are people with jobs like school groundsmen who are spraying this stuff on the grass all the time. Okay, so make sure your local council isn't spraying this on your grass verges or in your park where you want to go and picnic with your toddlers on the grass. Right, so glyphosate kills plants, so you have to develop crops that are resistant to it, and they are resistant to it, but they're still poisoned with it, in the sense that when we eat it, we are eating the glyphosate if we're not eating organic. And again, as I said, the pesticides were developed from nerve gases. The synthetic fertilizers were developed from explosives. And I think it's significant that they both began as weapons of war, which in 1945, they could have stopped production. But because of the profit motive, they didn't. They said, oh, you know what? We'll just modify them and you can put them on your fields. And they changed the names. So that's where they come from. And you may remember in August 2020 in Beirut, a huge warehouse full of stored synthetic fertilizers did explode with the loss of hundreds of lives. So they are still explosive. And of course, they're synthetic fertilizers. And we have natural fertilizer. It's called compost from vegetables and manure, animal poo. And if we once again, as holistic, organic, regenerative farmers do, have animals fertilizing our fields, rather than splitting the animals off in one place and growing the crops in another, then we're returning the carbon and the nitrogen to the soil, and we're fertilizing it naturally and improving its texture so that it won't wash away in floods and droughts. So it's a win-win-win. What's good for the earth and the fields is good for our bodies.
I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw it somewhere. I read somewhere that there are scientists at the moment saying that the cows are killing our planet and the trees are. We need manure to fertilize.
It's complete nonsense. This business about cows belching, right? Let's get it in perspective. Cows are just the latest domestic descendants of animals called the aurochs. That's AUROCHS, the aurochs or aurochs, however you pronounce it. They have been roaming the earth for millions of years. They have been fertilizing the earth for millions of years. And what regenerative farmers are doing is imitating nature by having the cows on one field for one day and then moving them onto another field and then moving them onto another field. And how that works is they don't eat all the grass, they eat about a third of it. and they fertilize it, obviously, and they plow some of the grass in, and that gives the chance a field to recover, a chance for the field to recover. The animals are moved on, and what happens then is you get increased soil fertility. And remember, every time a cow poos on the earth, it's returning carbon to the earth. It's actively combating global warming. And the fact that a few cows belch methane is neither here nor there. It's a red herring to distract from what's really damaging the planet, and that is petrochemical burning, right? The burning of fossil fuels that's coming out of the exhaust pipe of every vehicle. And by the way, these exhaust pipes are at the height of a toddler's nose. So we're directly poisoning our kids through air pollution. There are countless studies linking mental illness to air pollution in particular. Okay, and some of them have been done in the most polluted cities of the world, places like Santiago and Mexico City, where in the most polluted areas, they are actually, hold on to your seats when I say this, take a breath. They are actually seeing Alzheimer's in children and teenagers in the most polluted cities in the global south, where there's no regulation on emissions. And we're seeing air pollution from petrochemicals linked with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's, with autism, with kids who can't sleep, with all sorts of mental diseases and brain diseases. And the evidence is quite overwhelming. And they've looked at depression and anxiety and suicide risk and all these common mental disorders, and found that they are massively increased by high air pollution. And just in case you're thinking, well, the high air pollution is also in the areas of socioeconomic deprivation, couldn't it be that? The answer is they have controlled for that. They have ruled that out. So even taking into account all of those factors, the physical pollution itself, the particulate matter, the nitrogen dioxides, and so on, coming out of the exhaust pipe, are directly contributing to mental illness and neurological disorder and cancer and heart and lung disease. So the evidence is very, very strong, many thousands of published papers. And the awful tragedy about this is what we need to solve it is clean, green public transport that's cheap, efficient, reliable, pleasant to use. And then people would voluntarily abandon their cars and the nightmare of trying to find a parking space. It can be done. They're doing it in Finland. They have these trains which have a whole carriage, which is a creche, to make it easy to travel long distances with children. Some Scandinavian countries have forbidden domestic flights because you can get there by train. But in the UK, the train costs more than the plane if you want to go from London to Edinburgh. Now, this is madness, and the government could legislate to change it. And in terms of our car use, of course, we're going to use the car if the train doesn't go there, or the train costs a fortune, or the train is unpleasant and crowded because there's not enough trains, or the driver's off sick because there's not enough stop. This can be changed. It's about government policy. And I would also say that electric vehicles are not a total solution to this. They may be part of the solution, but although they are much less polluting locally, their tires still create the same amount of pollution as the tires of ordinary vehicles. Yes, there's no fumes coming out of an exhaust pipe, but hey, the batteries that they run on require rare earth minerals. Where are those rare earth minerals coming from?
Yeah.
They're coming from mines in the so-called Democratic Republic of Congo, and there are child slaves down those mines. There is child labor, slave labor, getting those minerals out of those mines. I don't want a battery in a car that was produced like that. And there are islands in Indonesia where innocent, uncontacted tribal peoples who've been living in harmony with nature for thousands and thousands of years and are the best natural stewards of the rainforest there are being thrown off their land to get at the nickel, because companies are mining nickel to make profits by selling us batteries for electric vehicles so we can feel smug and think we're helping the planet. We need to look beneath the surface, and we need to campaign for fabulous public transport so that people will voluntarily give up their cars, because there's no way to burn fossil fuels or mine rare earth minerals that is safe and ethical.
Again, I'm just completely being mind blown by this conversation. Um, would you say that you've noticed that there are any generational shifts in how younger people experience or approach mental health and environmental stresses? Has it changed a lot from how it
Yes.
used to be? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's changed out of all recognition, partly because of what I was saying at the beginning about the pressures that social media is putting young people, especially young women, under. Um, so there is much more mental distress than there was when I was a teenager. I mean, apart from the standard adolescent angst that we all went through, there really wasn't any mental illness among young people. Now it's absolutely rife. And I think, the environmental and nutritional factors we've talked about it are part of it. The breakdown of society is part of it. The lack of a sense of supportive community, stability, the kids knowing that their ecological future is uncertain, their economic prospects are appalling. Will they be able to buy a house to live in ever? But on the plus side, the taboo on talking about mental illness has gone. That has been demolished successfully in the past 10, 20 years. And that's a really good thing. At least we're talking about it. And that, in a way, provides a supportive community, which is what's been missing. But I think, yes, it's changed in that way. But you also asked me earlier about women getting holistic support.
Yes.
For their mental health. And
Yes.
what I need to say in that context is medicine is still fundamentally patriarchal. I don't care however many women doctors there are in high places, it is still a patriarchal institution. And women's mental health issues still get too easily dismissed. And what also happens, and again, this is because the Cartesian split between the mind and the body, is if a woman or a man actually is, in hospital with mental health issues, their physical issues always get ignored. And I have seen this again and again and again. If you've got a pain in the uterus, if you've got a problem in the pelvis, if you've got a problem in your arm or your leg or your heart or your lungs, once you've admitted to any level of mental distress, that physical symptom will never get taken seriously, especially if you're a woman. It will always be put down to what's going on in your mind. In other words, it'll be dismissed as psychosomatic. This is crude and it's destructive and it's stupid because it's perfectly possible to have a physical problem and a mental emotional problem at the same time. And of course, each influences the other. So yeah, that is the major problem. You've got something physically going on. They will not take it seriously if you admit to any level of emotional distress. And that needs to change. And that is a campaigning issue. Now, in case a lot of what I've said feels overwhelming, let's try and lower the overwhelm. Okay. I wouldn't be talking about any of this if there were not solutions. There are plenty of solutions. I've addressed them in both my books. From 2020, Staying Alive in Toxic Times, a seasonal guide to lifelong health, is about how we need to eat and live according to the seasons of the year. Tune back into the rhythms of light and dark, summer and winter. My more recent book from a year ago, Getting Healthy in Toxic Times, an ecological doctor's prescription for healing your body and the planet, directly addresses all these issues of industrial pollution and what we can do about it to protect our minds and our brains and our bodies. There's loads we can do, both on the collective political campaigning level and on the individual personal level. Right? I say there'd be no point in talking about it if we couldn't change it. We can change it in many, many ways. First of all, there are detoxification methods to get these substances out of your body. At the most basic level, eating organic, eating real food, okay? That means nothing synthetic, nothing in a package, nothing in a tin, nothing with an ingredients list. So real, organic, free range, meat, fish, eggs, dairy if you can take dairy, beans, pulses, lentils, whole grains, nuts, seeds, vast amount of vegetables and a moderate amount of fruit. That's real food. You pick an apple off a tree, there's no ingredients list on it. You catch a fish in the sea, and there are still clean parts of the sea where fish can be caught ethically and in moderation. It doesn't come with an ingredients list. So real food, organic food, loads and loads of green leafy vegetables. We all need that. No artificial additives, nothing synthetic, and no sugar, right? And in my first book, I have 2 or 3 pages in the introduction about how to break the sugar addiction, because sugar is ruining our liver, our pancreas, as well as our teeth. And it's feeding all the wrong bugs in the gut. So it's distorting the microbiome. But giving up sugar is very hard because we are programmed to crave it by evolution, because we evolved in conditions where we had just enough food to live on. And therefore, a sugar craving had an evolutionary advantage. It was a survival mechanism, because when we found, some bushes with berries in the autumn, or a bit of fruit on the tree, or very rarely some honey, we would be drawn to it because of the sugar craving, and we would eat that usually in the autumn, and it helped us lay down fat for the winter when food was scarce. And you had to run 20 miles to catch your most nutritious meal, which was a wild animal. So it was a survival mechanism to have this sugar craving. So for that reason, we all still crave it, but we're living in an environment where there's sugar at every supermarket checkout, at every garage, at every newsagent's. And it's even hidden in savory foods. If you buy a ready meal that's supposedly, cheese pie or something, you look at the ingredients list, anything that ends in O's, O-S-E, is a sugar. Maltose, dextrose, hundreds of names for sugar. Look them up. They're even in the health food shops now calling it things like agave syrup or coconut blossom nectar. It's just sugar. It's just sugar. So we crave it because we're programmed to do so by evolution. And we also crave it because breast milk is sweet, right? And therefore the sweet taste is associated from earliest infancy with love and comfort and security. So we're not going to get rid of the craving. And the reason I'm saying this is to not feel guilty if you are a sugar addict. We are all sugar addicts, but there are ways to break the addiction. And the first way is not to get hungry, to eat 3 meals a day. Because if you eat 3 regular meals a day with plenty of protein and vegetables and the good fats like nuts and seeds and a bit of avocado and so on, you won't get starving hungry. If you let yourself get starving hungry by leaving a massive gap, you will go for the sugar, because evolution has programmed you to do that. So don't feel guilty, don't miss meals, and start to cultivate the taste for foods that are the opposite of sweet. So try black currants, which are sour. Try the very dark green leaves, which are bitter, and grapefruit, which is both sour and bitter. Squeeze lemon and lime on your food. Get your taste buds accommodated, used to those very sour and bitter foods. Learn to love them. It can be done. And actually, with kids, you can do it even faster. Within 2 weeks, you can transform the taste buds. And then really sweet foods will start to taste yicky and disgusting, and the craving will go. If you have sugar in the house, you'll eat it. So don't have it in the house. Don't have a biscuit tin. Even for the builders, if you've got builders in, they can just have a cup of herb tea. They'll cope. Seriously. So you can change your taste buds and reduce the sugar cravings in those ways. As I say, don't let yourself get hungry, because then you'll just go and grab some sugar. And I had one child patient that really sticks in my mind, who'd never eaten fruit and vegetables and was living on sugar. And within 2 weeks, we turned it around. He came to see me and he said, I'm eating my Dr. Jenny Goodman red peppers. I've never had red peppers before. And he said, did you know onion and courgette taste sweet as well? You see, if you change your taste buds by getting rid of the concentrated sugar, you can taste the safe, natural amount of sugar that's actually there, not just in fruit, but even in vegetables. Yeah. So that's one of the golden rules, to cut out the sugar. If you do that, your brain will be far, far happier. And particularly kids with ADHD, the wild fluctuations in mood and behavior can be stabilized by stabilizing the blood sugar in this way. So Detox methods, as well as everything I've said, there are specific things you can do. Some of this you can do with kids, but a lot of it you can't. Okay, so organic vegetable juicing to get the maximum antioxidants out of your vegetables. And you want to use things like lettuce and celery, all the green stuff, a little bit of beetroot for sweetness, and sip it slowly. Don't swig it. Okay, so vegetable juicing is brilliant for detox. High dose vitamin C, in a way I describe in detail in chapter 7 of this book, is called Tox Detox. You can't poison the planet without poisoning the people. And it goes through the 7 methods of detoxification that you can do. So vegetable juicing, saunas done in a particular way, very particular way. So you wipe off the sweat and you don't leave it on, and then you have a shower. Colonic hydrotherapy, it's not for everyone and it's not for anyone under 18, but it can be immensely useful because if you clear out the colon, then the blood supply that reaches the liver from the colon is not full of toxic microbiome products, and it leaves the liver with more capacity to detox everything else. Epsom salts baths, brilliant for the kids with autism and ADHD. There are studies on this by Professor Rosemary Waring. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate. You put it in the bath, you lie in it for 20 minutes. You can have candles, turn off the lights, have lavender oil. It's brilliant to get these antsy kids to go to sleep. You can sprout seedlings on your window ledge. You can grow your own organic salad all year round. And there are specific nutrients that help to detox specific toxins. So for example, zinc and the amino acid methionine will take nickel out of the body. Silica will take aluminium out of the body. Many substances will remove mercury, so long as it's not still in the fillings in your teeth. So organically grown coriander, it's vital that it be organically grown because coriander is so good at picking up mercury, it'll pick it up from the soil if it's on the site of an old factory. So organically grown coriander, instead of depositing mercury in your body, will take it out. And chlorella and all the sulfur-containing allium vegetables, onions, garlic, leeks, and so on, and zinc and selenium and iodine and vitamin C. Vitamin C detoxes all the heavy metals. It's a brilliant antioxidant. It detoxes everything else, along with a little bit of vitamin E, which detoxes, it stops the oxidation of the fatty part of the body, whereas vitamin C stops the oxidation of the liquid compartments of the body. And in the book, I describe how to build that dose up very, very slowly, because everyone has their personal maximum. Some people, if they get up to 20 grams a day, they'll get the runs, but it's very individual. So you go up 0.5 gram a day until you get the runs, and then you go down to the dosage of the day before. You can do that for up to 6 months, and it removes the heavy metals and it cleanses the microbiome. And guess what? Human beings, guinea pigs, and fruit bats are the only mammals that can't make our own vitamin C.
Oh, wow.
The rest of the animal kingdom doesn't need it because they can make their own, but we can't, and we need it. And, unless you're eating a huge amount of organic raw veg every day, you may not be getting enough because, see, the amount of these vitamins that we need has gone up hugely since the Industrial Revolution. When we were all peasant farmers and we were eating what we grew, and it was fresh and it was organic and it was locally grown, and we didn't have much to detoxify. But now, not only is our food from far away and it's lost half the goodness by the time it reaches us, it's been packaged in plastic and God knows what, it may have been irradiated, it may not be fresh. Our liver detox enzymes are working over time, and they need vitamin C, all the B vitamins and all the minerals in large quantities in order to do this job that they were not, in evolutionary terms, expecting to do. So that's why we need more, not less. Alcohol destroys all those nutrients.
I was just about to say, Dr. Goodman, I need to ask you about alcohol because we've normalized alcohol. It's a cultural thing, it's a social thing to do. It's very normal, it's everywhere. How bad is alcohol for your brain and your body?
It depends on your metabolism, on how much you drink, and on whether it's organic. So taking that last point first, people come to me and they're drinking a bottle of wine a night. I reel back in horror, or I try not to reel back in horror, and I say, have you tried Soil Association approved organic wine? Because grapes are very, very heavily sprayed with insecticides. If you're drinking non-organic wine, you're drinking insecticides as well. So I start there, get them to change to organic. It's a bit more expensive, so they'll drink a bit less. I get them to sip it rather than swig it. And then we start talking about the amount. And much as I wish it were not the case, women can take less alcohol than men because our liver spends 1/3 of its energy detoxifying our own estrogen. We just haven't got the spare capacity for too much alcohol. So it should be organic, it should be in moderation. And we can get ourselves genetically tested these days. And my favorite company is called Life Code GX, and see how well your body detoxes alcohol. If you're from East Asia, probably not very well. There are these genetic differences, you know? So do your genetic testing, see how much you can take, and also ask yourself what it is in your life that means you need a bottle of wine every night to kind of block it out. To, you know, can you debrief with a friend? Can you go out to a dance class? Can you join a choir? Can you do something that enhances your life that doesn't mean getting blotto? So yeah, of course we're drinking vastly too much alcohol, but it's okay to have a little bit in moderation. And it's not only about the amount, it's about the frequency. If you drink alcohol every single day, your liver gets absolutely no chance to recover. If you drink alcohol 2 or 3 or even 4 times a week in moderation and leave gaps in between, your liver can recover. But we are seeing a lot of what's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. People's liver looking on ultrasound scan like the liver of an alcoholic, but they don't drink. It's the sugar and the industrial pollutants. Maybe they work in a factory, you know, and they're a welder or they're using solvents. All those industrial poisons do the same damage to the liver, right? Smoking also vastly increases our requirement for vitamin C. Paracetamol does, right? So all this stuff we're absorbing is meaning that we need vastly more vitamin C and the other antioxidant nutrients that we used to have. That's why I advocate vegetable juicing, because you could well say, well, can't we just eat the vegetables? Well, yeah, you could have done 200 or 300 years ago. But now we are assailed by so many pollutants that we actually need it in the concentrated form of homemade vegetable juice. Now, on the plus side, because I don't want people to be too overwhelmed by this, right? Actually, having said all that, 90% of our time is spent indoors. Now, that's a shame because we don't get enough sunshine, fresh air, and exercise. But that means 90% of the pollution we're exposed to is the pollution in our own home. And there's plenty we can do about that. We can stop spraying air freshener about the place. You look at those ingredients, they're absolutely toxic. They're going in through your lungs, your skin, and your eyes. Why do you need to freshen the air in the house? Open the window, empty the bins. Spray some nice essential oils around, you know, organic essential oils, lavender, jasmine, lemongrass. Secondly, look at all the cleaning chemicals in the cupboard under your sink. They're all toxic and they're all unnecessary. And they can be replaced by something like bicarb, you know, bicarbonate of soda and a bit of water and elbow grease. Look at the cosmetics in your bathroom cabinets. They're all full of petrochemicals. If you wouldn't eat them, you shouldn't put them on your skin because they're going in just as surely. They can all be replaced by natural herbal alternatives. And if you want recommendations, look on the health and beauty pages of the Soil Association's website. I mean, there's a lot of detail about this in chapter 7 of the new book, and the chapter's called I should have called it Home Sweet Home or Home Safe Home. Can't remember what I called it, but the subtitle is The Surprising Poisonings of Everyday Life. Yes, it's called A Tour of Your House because I go through each room. So in the bathroom, you've got all those unnecessary personal care products, which I call personal scare products, which can all be replaced by safe, herbal, organic products. Look at the Soil Association website. If you go into the bedroom, what are you sleeping on? Most mattresses are outgassing the toxic synthetic chemicals they're made of for the first year or two. So if you're buying new, get an organic mattress. Much easier to do than it used to be. Do you want to keep the moths out of your clothes? Just spray lavender oil, and green fibers make a nice combination for that, because the mothballs are paradichlorobenzene, which is a very toxic insecticide. So don't use that. And similarly with your soft furnishings, synthetic soft furnishings are, your nylon, your polyester, all those materials are actually petrochemicals. They're actually plastic in fabric form, as is synthetic clothing. So they're flammable. And so by law, they have to be impregnated with flame retardants. Those flame retardants, the polybrominated biphenyls and polybrominated diethers. The brominated tells you there's bromine in there, which can displace the iodine from your thyroid gland and from your breast tissue and everywhere else. So that new soft furnishing is giving out these things. So if you must buy new, secondhand is safer in many ways. If you must buy new, buy it in the spring, have the windows open, or buy organically produced natural material soft furnishing. So same with carpets, cushions, curtains, and so on. So there's masses you can do in the home once you know. But what we haven't talked about, because we've only talked about chemical poisoning, we haven't talked about electromagnetic toxicity, which is, well,
Goodness.
I tell you what, sharing this stuff is not a way to get popular, but my conscience won't let me stay silent about it. There is electromagnetic radiation of a frequency our bodies were not remotely evolved to cope with, coming out of your mobile phone, coming out of the mobile phone mast or cell phone tower that's nearer your house than it should be, and coming out of your Wi-Fi router and the intercom that you've, God forbid, put in your child's bedroom. And it's much easier to have the child in the same room as you at all times, and then you don't have to worry. These devices and your Bluetooth and your fitness Fitbit thing, they're all giving out electromagnetic radiation. Now, the electromagnetic field of the earth is what we evolved with over millions of years. And you can be in touch with that again right now by going to stand barefoot on the grass.
Right.
And it feels instantly better, grounding, calming. But once you come into your house, your feet aren't on the ground, and you've got all these electronic devices giving out electromagnetic radiation that turns out to be at the opposite end of the spectrum from nuclear radiation, but every bit as dangerous by different mechanisms. One of the mechanisms by which it does us damage is, now this is a bit complicated, but in our cell membranes, we have voltage gated calcium channels. These are pores, P-O-R-E-S, pores within the membrane that have the job of letting a charged atom, an ion like calcium or sodium, potassium, in and out of the cell. But not willy-nilly. The cell is in control of that. And it only opens these channels to let calcium in if it gets a subtle electrical signal. But your mobile phone is giving off a not at all subtle electromagnetic signal. All this magnetic radiation around us is forcing these channels open. So calcium is flooding into the cell. Now, calcium should be an extracellular mineral. It's meant to live outside the cell. Magnesium lives inside the cell. But the calcium is flooding in. There it combines with protein, so you can't get it out, even with intravenous magnesium drips. So that calcium flooding into the cells is linked with almost every illness that you can find, as is inflammation, as is oxidative stress. And all of these are made worse by electromagnetic radiation. But there are safer ways to use this technology, particularly your own phone. You just hold it at a distance, yeah? Put it on speakerphone or send a text rather than speaking. You can get protective covers for them when you're not using them. Don't put them in your top pocket and don't put them in your trouser pocket. You're irradiating your ovaries or your testes or your unborn baby. Okay, so if you hold it touching your head, you are increasing your risk of a brain tumor. But if you hold it even a few inches away, you are not. The risk goes down astronomically. And actually, the manufacturers know this. And there are tiny package inserts that come with your phone that tell you not to hold it touching your head. And that, of course, the manufacturers are saying that to defend themselves against claims. The insurers make sure that that happens. And there have been claims, and again, they have been won, and the companies have had to pay out. So they know that if the mobile phone is touching your head or very close, it's irradiating your brain and it's incredibly dangerous. But as I say, in chapter 6 of this book, there are plenty of ways to use the technology safely. I mean, one could wish that the manufacturers had chosen wavelengths that were less inimical to human physiology. I don't know why they didn't, but there are still loads of ways we can protect ourselves. So don't have the Wi-Fi router anywhere near your head. Don't have it in the bedroom. For God's sake, don't have it in your child's bedroom. And learn to use the technology safely. And if you're moving house, make sure you're not right next to a mobile phone mast. A study from Switzerland showed that if you're 600 yards or nearer, your risk of dementia is much increased compared to someone who lives more than 600 yards away from them. But there's protective clothing, there's protective cases for your phones, there's all sorts of things we can do. I'm speaking to you now with perfectly good broadband on my PC, my computer that is not a laptop, but even if it were, it could be plugged in with an Ethernet cable, right? I have no Wi-Fi on in my house, but it's perfectly possible, as you can hear clearly, to use the technology without Wi-Fi. You just get Ethernet cables or plugged in computers on the desk. So there are solutions to all of this. Don't be overwhelmed. Be a bit angry perhaps, but don't be overwhelmed.
I think this is why I do this, because I learned so much, and I just know there's so many people who might not necessarily be aware of all of this that are going to learn. I had no idea about this. Is it intranet you just mentioned?
Ethernet.
Ethernet.
The Ethernet cable. It's a piece of wire. It's a chunky cable and means you don't need Wi-Fi. I want to say one more thing, because you were talking about mental illness in young people, and a lot of the kids are on their phone late into the night. Not only is the electromagnetic radiation damaging their brains, but the bright light, the white which contains blue light, is affecting the pineal. And the pineal gland, the pineal gland in the brain tells us whether it's day or night, right? A sort of red orange light, because we used to sit around the fire, didn't we, as hunter-gatherers at night, tells us it's evening. But a bright blue light tells us it's blue sky and sunshine and morning, time to wake up. So the kids can't sleep because their phone light is giving them the message that it's time to wake up. But now you can try and stop that, but you can also buy light bulbs that are from conscious spaces that are full spectrum during the day, halfway in the afternoon, and they are orange in the evening. So they're like the dim light of a fire in the evening. And that tells the pineal it's time to wind down and go to bed, because the job of the pineal is to produce melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that helps you go to sleep, and it is not produced in bright light. It is only produced in darkness. We need some darkness for the pineal to make melatonin. Not only does it help us go to sleep, it's an antioxidant, it's an anti-cancer substance, and it's preventing precocious puberty. And precocious puberty, right, puberty happening much too early in young girls, is an increasing problem worldwide. And it's partly pineal damage by screen light, but it's also pineal damage from something we haven't had much chance to talk about, and that is fluoride. And this,
I'm hoping you'll come back, because I feel like we haven't had enough time. Oh, goodness.
saying that the problem of precocious puberty is very severe in Mexico. And in Mexico, they've put fluoride in their table salt. They have fluoridated table salt. So it messes with the pineal gland. It doesn't produce melatonin. Girls are starting their periods at 8. This is biologically and socially and sexually catastrophic. And yeah, we need to not have fluoride in our water. We need to not have bright lights late at night. We need to love our pineal glands and get out there in the morning and get the sunshine at the right time of day.
So I do the thing where I wake up in the morning. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, I do my little meditation by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And then I, say my affirmations and I do a little prayer. And then I go out and I stare at the sun directly for about, well, not directly at the sun, but I get like sunlight. But I stare at the sun for about 5 minutes. And and apparently, according to Dr. Huberman, please, this is not verbatim, but it wakes up your circadian rhythm and it helps with your pineal gland. I don't know how true that is.
Just looking at the blue sky on a sunny day will do that. I really wouldn't stare directly at the sky. It scares the life out of me.
But get out there and look at this blue sky on a sunny day. It does help with your pineal gland.
And also know that even if it's cloudy, there's plenty of ultraviolet and everything else getting through the clouds. Otherwise, it would actually be dark. So it's still valuable even on a cloudy day.
So what gives you hope, considering there's so much darkness in the world? What's giving you hope at the moment around mental health and ecological awareness and
life and hope bring eternal? What gives me hope is that awareness is mushrooming. But the sort of thing you and I are talking about would never have been discussed even as recently as 10 years ago. And that young people know they've got sound instincts, they know something's wrong, and they're starting to find out what it is. So, I think things are changing, and I believe in change from the grassroots, because those in power will never do anything because they're addicted to their power and their money. We are, as you said, being poisoned for profit. If we find out about that, we can simply boycott the poisonous products. And then nobody will make them anymore, because it's all very well speaking truth to power, but power doesn't recognize the language of truth. It does recognize the language of money. If we vote with our wallets, we can transform this situation. And more young people are learning this. That's what gives me hope.
Amazing. Dr. Goodman, where do we find your books? Where can we find your books to purchase them?
Anyway, any bookshop or any online retailer. Of course, it's cheapest on the big online retailer, but I would urge you to go to more ethical places like bookshop.org, which is an online bookseller that gives part of its proceeds to real independent physical bookshops. My website is drjennygoodman.com. I am on all the social media platforms, but that's not a way to communicate with me because I don't look at it. But yeah, drjennygoodman.com. You can get the books from any bookshop. So this one, the recent one, Getting Healthy in Toxic Times, is published by Chelsea Green. And the first one, Staying Alive in Toxic Times, is published by Yellow Kite, which is an imprint of Hodder and Stoughton. And I didn't want the titles to be so similar, but that wasn't my decision. I would have called the first book, What's Got Into You? How pollution is damaging our health and what we can do about it. But there you go.
Wow. Dr. Jenny Goodman, it has been phenomenal. I have to say, this has been one of my favorite episodes that I've done thus far. I have learned so much, and I hope to have you back again. I'm going to make sure to link your website and where we can find your books on the YouTube page and all the socials as well. It has been mind-blowing stuff. Thank you for doing your work. Please don't stop. This is really, really needed. And yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for inviting me.